for sale! Palestine is not for sale!
That's some of what it sounded like on Thursday in Thornhill outside one of Ontario's largest Orthodox synagogues, the Beth Avraham Yosef. For about 7 hours that day, the building was the flashpoint for an anti-Israel demonstration. They tried to disrupt an Israeli real estate fair going on inside. Where agents were offering apartments to Diaspora Jews in prime locations like Tel Aviv, Beit Shemesh, Jerusalem, and Netanya. All are located inside Israel's original boundaries. But some properties were also being advertised for sale in Efrat, Ma'ale Adumim, and Mitzpeh Jericho, communities of mainly religious Jews, including many from North America, and located in the disputed West Bank territories east of Jerusalem, which Israel controls militarily since capturing the area in 1967 from Jordan. The protesters outside say it's stolen land, as you've heard. The UN and Canada and others, including some progressive Jewish groups, say these settlements are illegal and violate international law and also pose an obstacle to eventual peace. The issue heated up again last week after Israel announced it had approved a record 18,000 new settlement homes in the zone in the past year. And a far-right Israeli cabinet minister called for more restrictions on the movement of Palestinians and more army checkpoints after a terror attack killed one Israeli and wounded 11 more.
The idea that Canadians are investing in buying properties in illegal settlements, furthering a conflict, is rightfully making people upset.
I'm Ellen Besner, and this is what Jewish Canada sounds like for Monday, March the 11th, 2024. Welcome to the CJN Daily, a podcast of the Canadian Jewish News, sponsored by Metropia. I spent nearly 4 hours on Thursday covering the protests at the Bayit and the counter-demonstration by the Jewish community in support of Israel.
Bring them home! Bring them home!
They tried plenty of tactics. They prayed outdoors on a loudspeaker. They sang patriotic songs and waved flags. Somebody even blew a shofar. The loudspeakers and sound system rigged up from the synagogue were no match for the powerful amps that the anti-Israel protesters brought with them on the back of pickup trucks. And they amplified the angry insults and screaming voices that smacked into your chest like you were at a rock concert and reverberated against the front doors of the synagogue, where someone had posted no trespassing legal-looking notices against intruders. It wasn't quite the protection of an actual court injunction, which Montreal's Jewish community won 2 nights earlier to prevent protesters from blocking access to the venue where this particular real estate show started at the Spanish and Portuguese synagogue. There are actually 2 unrelated real estate shows currently on a North American tour. Both end later this week after stops in New York and New Jersey. But the rabbi at the Bayit, Daniel Koropkin, says despite his synagogue becoming the latest target of protests since October 7th over Israel and Palestine, the event was not going to be canceled.
There was one person out of a group of many voices that said maybe we should think about canceling, but the vast majority of the Jewish community is really fed up. We really feel, we're not going to capitulate, we're not going to roll over, and you have your narrative. We think it's completely false. We're appalled that you only seem to care about your own casualties and what's happening to Palestinians, and you don't care about the fact that there are still over 130 hostages still being held in Gaza.
No one was getting into the real estate event in the building until you went through a thorough ID check. Security even had a photocopy at the registration table with mugshots of suspected anti-Israel troublemakers to watch out for. The event was on the 2nd floor. There were about 25 booths offering everything from apartments to property management firms and lawyers who could arrange all the paperwork. Agents showed prospective buyers blueprints of the apartment layouts. Now, some of the people we spoke to who were browsing wanted to move to Israel to be with their kids who already live there. Others felt it was important to help the economy of Israel, where last year real estate sales were at the lowest they'd been in 20 years, thanks to a recession and then the war. And still others hope to have a bolt hole to escape to from the rising antisemitism here in Canada. But nobody I spoke to would let me use their real names in our story.
Well, just looking at what's going on in the world, I just think it's important to know what's on offer, and just think of purchasing. This is an important time in our lives, and I've always thought about this, so it's not the first time. But it just, because of the war, I just felt that now is really the time. The show is here now too, so I said I'm going to come and check it out.
And do you guys have like family in Israel that there would be some reason that you would go, like soon, or?
I do have family there, but that's not the only reason that will pull me there. I just think it's important for every Jew to have a piece of the land. Very important.
There are quite a few people in the neighborhood who are descendants of Holocaust survivors, and I think it's particularly difficult for people such as myself who may have been raised with stories of the tightening noose on the Jewish community in Europe to have to face something along these lines today. In what is supposedly a democratic country, we don't understand why the laws aren't being enforced.
Israeli promoter Gidon Katz has been running these real estate events for decades through his marketing company IMP Limited, based in Jerusalem. In full disclosure, they have bought ads for these events many times over the years in the pages of the CJN. You've just come from Montreal. Can you walk us through how that still remains with you? What was it like?
We planned these events a month in advance, and we wanted to come to Canada. We actually planned to have the event in October, and obviously we needed to postpone it due to the situation. Again, it's an informational event that has taken place dozens and dozens of times throughout North America. Canada slightly less, but I myself have been to Canada and doing these similar events since 2002, 2003. Some, you have 10, 15, 20, 30 vendors, and they come and they showcase different properties across Israel. An average Jewish person would probably want to inquire, gather information, and then he'll make up his mind. And when he comes to Israel, he'll be able to purchase what he wishes. So we're planning Montreal, and sometimes something like last week or 10 days ago, we started hearing rumors that there's going to be some protesting. I wasn't thinking it's so serious. I think it escalated a few days ago. I think they only caused it to be more successful. The Jewish population in the great city of Montreal felt that they needed to support those who were thinking of coming, so they did come. And there were dozens and dozens of volunteers that came to protect us, to look after us. And I can't be more grateful.
When you went there and you got a chance to navigate your way into the Spanish and Portuguese, was it surprising to you, the large protests that you saw? Were you expecting it to be that way?
There was a more violent event the day before with Jewish Federation there. So I think the police were ready for their behavior, and probably it was slightly less than what I thought it was going to be. And they were in their corner, so they made noise. So what can I do?
In these events, I know you've had them in London, England, and elsewhere in the United States. It's not the first time there's been protests. You've experienced protests before, but the one that's in Toronto, are you aware that there have been calls for it to be cancelled?
Look, I can't speak in the name of people that I don't know. I haven't spoken to anyone who wants to cancel it. On the contrary, leaders of the community that have spoken to me about this say that we're not going to succumb to terror. It's not even a question. It didn't never cross anyone's mind. And I could say that also for the United States, for the events planned for next week. No rabbi, no leader of any community is saying that we need to cancel this event. On the contrary, we are a free country. We're doing nothing wrong. And the way they're spinning it is just evil.
Okay, tell me what they're spinning. How are you hearing? What are you hearing?
We're selling occupied Palestinians to Jews. We're continuing to steal the land. Well, if they say that I haven't got any right to exist, so what can I say? I think this sums it all up. From the river to the sea, right? That means I've got nowhere to be. Okay, that's what they said 80 years ago.
So would there be any consideration of selling only within Israel proper and not the sort of 3 or 4 of them which caused the problems.
No. Don't be guided by the propaganda. They don't see as a specific place as a problem. They see Tel Aviv as a problem, right? They say Jerusalem as a problem. They say Beersheba as a problem, right? You see the maps they're spreading on social media that we've stolen the whole country. Well, those who think so, good for them.
To be fair, it's not just people in the Palestinian or anti-Israel community. Some of the Jewish progressive groups agree, especially here, the ones we've spoken to, that it would be best not to do those settlement areas where a Canadian government too also frowns on that.
No, so I understand, but from what I see of their publicity on social media is that's not the point. They're using that as maybe as a trigger. If one vendor is offering information about something that they call a settlement, but what they publish on social media is that basically, slowly but slowly, Israel Jews have taken away Palestine from Palestinians, and we've got no right to live there. So Tel Aviv is a settlement in their eyes, and Jerusalem, the capital of Israel, is a settlement in their eyes. Okay, so I think it's an excuse for them to find something to protest against Israel and Israelis. And if it wasn't me, it would have been someone else. When live our lives and do business, and hopefully there'll be peace.
Can we talk a bit about how the fair works?
It's pretty simple. What we're offering is a wide variety of projects across Israel, 90 different projects. We're offering additional services that people need to make this decision: mortgage brokers, home management, lawyers, talking about tax planning, etc. What's the right way and how to do it. And all under one roof, you get a solution that would allow you to make a calculated decision. So if you think you've got a certain amount of money and you want to buy something in the north or the south, or it's either budget driven or it's an area driven. You want something in Tel Aviv. Now let's see what's available. You want something in the city of Bet Shemesh or Nahariya. Or, what could I buy for a few $100,000? And then you start your process. You go, you sit with 3, 4, 5, 6 vendors, right, based on the parameters that I mentioned, and you gather the information.
Thank you. Who usually comes to this? What would you say your market is? Religious Zionists or Sephardic or people who are nefesh b'nefesh, things like that. I know you're tied to them anyway, but yeah.
First of all, from all the communities you mentioned, they're all interested, but for different reasons. Some are planning to move tomorrow. Some are planning to retire and move, and it'll take them 5-6 years. Some are planning they want to invest. They're thinking of, I want something to have, and meantime, let it make me some money. Where's a good investment?
After October 7th, have you seen a much larger interest being shown in your real estate fairs?
Yeah, I was very surprised, I must say. At the beginning, I thought that, the foreigners, the chutznikim, as we call them, they will be more hesitant. Maybe, we're in war. That we didn't choose, but still, maybe you're safer here. Well, I don't know now after all these protests, but on the contrary, we saw more and more people interested and wanting to inquire and purchase. That is crazy now. Maybe it's because of the rise of antisemitism, maybe because of solidarity, maybe because of other reasons. But I'm saying the fact is that there's more and more interest in purchasing something in Israel.
Okay. And how will it help construction? Because I know a lot of construction workers live in the West Bank. Because isn't it a lockdown now, so they can't really get into Israel?
Yes. So the Israeli government issued, to date, 40,000 permits for foreign workers to come to Israel. And they've been flying in from India and Bangladesh and other places. Actually, you should know they've been paid the minimum wage in Israel, not the minimum wage in India. So they're getting paid a regular salary in Israel, and some are being paid double that because they're professional workers. So tens of thousands of foreign workers have come in, and they're building. There was a delay of 2 months, but the government overcome that.
Ben Murane of the New Israel Fund's Canadian office was watching these real estate shows with some dismay. His group works for improved human rights for Palestinians under Israeli military rule.
First of all, what is the international legal view of settlements and apartments and land in the West Bank?
Yeah, I think Canada should be, investing in Israel proper. That's wonderful. It's a part of the Canadian-Israel and Israeli, diaspora relationship. It's good for Israel, and Israel needs our help right now. When it comes to settlements, like across the Green Line in the West Bank or in Gaza longer ago, it's legally and morally problematic. So first, it is global policy, as well as the policy of the Canadian government, that all settlements are illegal. It's the policy of the United States, Israel's greatest friend. It's our policy also since Harper and before. Australia, Germany, France, the entirety of the EU, you name it, Russia, China, on all continents, nobody recognizes the settlements as legal. Specifically, Canada says, Canada does not recognize permanent Israeli control over the territories occupied in 1967, and it gives a couple extra reasons. They're a violation of the Fourth Geneva Convention, which we'll get back to in a second, and they're also a serious obstacle to achieving a comprehensive, just, and lasting peace. And both of those things are absolutely correct. Israel finds itself as the only opinion holder that these settlements are legal. But even under Israeli law, let's look at that for a second. The government of Israel, as it advances, say, taking this piece of land and that piece of land and authorizing infrastructure like public utilities or paving roads or whatever, it cites its occupying powers underneath the Fourth Geneva Convention as its permission to change the facts on the ground. And we see that every time Israeli human rights groups, when they take the Israeli government to court saying you just took land away from this village and you've expanded the settlement, all of this is illegal, the Israeli Supreme Court says, yes, you're right, but are there mitigating factors? There is no debate in the Israeli legal system that these settlements are legal by international law because Israel has not formally annexed them. If it hasn't annexed them and said, this is the borderline behind this, it is Israel, then it has to cite some legal powers to do so, and it uses the Geneva Convention. So it's legally problematic. But the real reason here is that it's an obstacle to a just and lasting peace. I think the reason this has come up with people right now is because people are looking at, well, where does Canada show up in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict? This is a long-lasting, 100-year conflict over real estate and the mutual self-recognition of two peoples. And at the heart of that conflict is, where will the borders go and who gets to decide where the borders go?
They've had these many times over the last few years in Canada with pretty much no under the radar at the same venues. Why would they not expect protests?
Well, there's a couple of reasons. I anticipate that some of this criticism is coming from within the Jewish community and some of this criticism is coming from outside the Jewish community. So in both cases, October 7th and the war since has challenged people's fundamental assumptions about the sort of equilibrium of the conflict, that we can ignore it or manage it, and that we will be able to live with the consequences of not resolving the conflict. So I think a lot of people saw the brutality and the ghastly massacres that Hamas committed as a wake-up call. What we have been doing didn't work. It didn't keep us safe. And there's a lot of people now, I think, really reopening some of their prior exceptions. Like, maybe, is there anything we can do to prevent future October 7th by coming to an accommodation with the moderates in Palestinian society and trying to resolve the conflict itself? And a deep part of that is, what are we doing with the settlements? How are we going to get out of them? Or how are we going to resolve the conflict? And part of that is not making them bigger.
There is a lot of support for this type of purchasing. People are making aliyah, the sort of religious Zionist messianic group that thinks this is okay, from people who want to also buy cheaper land, cheaper apartments, because, $500,000 Israel shekels for an apartment is affordable for some people and doesn't have a problem with it. And yet that's part of our voices of what Jewish Canada sounds like, is that community that thinks there's nothing wrong with this. What should they understand about, why people think this is not a cool thing at this moment?
I think part of the answer lies in a changing relationship between the Jewish diaspora and the government of Israel. I think underneath the incredible pain and rightful fury at certain Palestinians and Hamas, there's also a great sense of broken trust with the Israeli government. This particular Israeli government, with its far-right extremist nationalists and their willingness, for ideological reasons, to sort of light the keg on fire and not care about the consequences. And so I think people in the Jewish community, especially because of what the Israeli government did the first 9 months of last year with its judicial overhaul and with its willingness to rewrite the Israeli social contract and sweep aside a lot of things that were the democratic protections and the definition of what many diaspora Jews saw as Israel's virtues, have a relationship now where they want to support Israel, they want to support Israeli society, but they see this particular Israeli government as dangerous to Israel's long-term security. I think that puts them in the same camp as most Israelis. 8 out of 10 Israelis blame this Israeli government and Netanyahu personally for the failures on and after October 7th. So no surprise that many Canadian Jews feel like they have to speak up more. They were speaking up more October 6th than before. A huge amount of engagement, protest, public criticism of the Israeli government to defend Israel from its own extremists. And so no surprise, who are those extremists? They're Itamar Ben-Gvir and Bezalel Smotrich, outspoken advocates of the settlements, the settlement enterprise, who have little to no care about international law, and for Jews like myself and other progressives, represent the worst of Israeli tendencies and values. I think we are animated to protect Israel more vocally than before because we see it as greatly at danger by the settlement enterprise and people for whom they have no care in the world what the rest of Israeli society thinks, what the rest of the diaspora Jewish community thinks, or what anything about what our key and core important allies expect of Israel as a partner.
Do you think that these should have been canceled? Because look at what happens. The police have to come. The media comes. People get arrested. People lose their tempers. It gets on social media. It looks bad.
I'm in the camp of people who believe that as long as it's an argument for the sake of heaven, that we don't do ourselves a service by sort of pretending we don't have differences. There is no such thing as one Jewish opinion. There's no such thing as the Jewish community. There are many Jewish communities, and we all live in community with each other. And I don't think it's wise for us to pretend that we aren't hugely diverse. So I don't want us to avoid it. What I do think everybody needs to take heart, however, is everybody needs to take it down a notch. We need to be able to embrace differences and talk about those differences productively. I don't think carrying around nail guns to protests is, like we saw recently, is a particularly wise way to handle one's Jewish opinion. I think it would be better to invest inside Israel, in Israel proper, and make Israel proper a better, more prosperous, more democratic place. I would really like to see us separate from the Palestinians, and I think to achieve a negotiated, mutual two-state solution. To that end, those real estate promotions are not helpful.
And that's what Jewish Canada sounds like for this episode of the CJN Daily, sponsored by Metropia. Integrity, community, quality, and customer care. Since Thursday, the Jewish community in Toronto has had its legal advisors working overtime on a strategy that could include getting court injunctions the way Montreal did to keep protesters away from Jewish institutions. But officials say they're also seeking a wider bubble of protection from the Ontario government, although it isn't clear what that would look like, so stay tuned on that front. Meanwhile, you've likely heard that police did make arrests in Thornhill and in Montreal. If you were at any of these events and you want to share your thoughts with me, I'm at ebessner@thecjn.ca. And don't forget to check the show notes, because you remember that anti-Semitism ad that was supposed to air during the Super Bowl last month, but it wasn't shown. And now we wondered what would happen, whether it would ever air. Well, it was aired on the American version of the Oscars telecast last night and on YouTube. It was filmed in the Kensington Market with real Canadian rabbis Michael Dolgan and Aviva Reisky. The ad is called Neighbors, and you should go to our links to look at our stories about how it was filmed and why the owner of the New England Patriots commissioned it to teach Americans to stand up for their Jewish neighbors. Thanks for listening.